To another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to stop right here and welcome our guests and to thank them for coming and sharing several things that I deem very important. Time. That commodity is such a precious thing. We are all been given 24 hours to manage our existence while we're here, and how we utilize that is very telling. And the fact that Karen is here to spend some of that with us, I deeply appreciate it. And the other is her journey that housed who she was, that made her who she is today, so that you and I can get a chance to partake of her wisdom, her knowledge, all of the things that she learned, so that you and I can become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. Karen, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. Introduce yourself to the people.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm grateful to be here. So, um, yeah, I'm currently I'm a minister. I'm an animal communicator. I'm a safari host. I'm a little bit of all these things, but as we talk, it'll see how they all fit together, for sure.
Mhm.
So,
Definitely, I actually know someone in in Florida that is also a minister and an animal communicator as well, and I've been in her space and so forth. So I'm excited about this conversation. So uh, we like to go back, Karen, because we came from somewhere. We came from this group of people that. Expressed love and came and we brought into this family and we moved through life. So I want you to talk to us about your family as to how was that and what was your upbringing like?
yeah, I was born. I was the last of five kids in a Catholic family, and in a, I guess, typical for the time suburban Seattle neighborhood, middle class, seemed all okay. But uh, in my experience, we went to church, but we weren't spiritual. We didn't read the Bible. We didn't do anything like that. And being the youngest of five, I felt that no one allowed me to talk, and
Wow.
people would talk for me. No
Hmm.
one would ask what I thought about anything. And I've come to realize that my my not inability, but my I didn't have the time to talk was really part of the training for where I am now. Um,
Yeah.
and but growing up through that, once I left, once I graduated high school and left home, I started exploring a little bit more what else was out there because I knew something. I knew there was
Yeah.
something that was I didn't know about, but I couldn't quite figure out
Hmm.
what it was. And sometimes I say, I don't know how I got into this family because they're very much different than me in many ways. Although two of them, one sister and one brother, have given me books to read and exposure that kind of led me on a different journey.
Yeah, it's
So,
fascinating. I love that your family unit, because I tell people that mix that we came from is what gave birth to us, Karen. You know, is as difficult as it is, or whatever that space was, it gave birth to us and began to formulate how we relate to others within our family, but also how we relate to self
mhm.
and the world. And the fact that you could not, you didn't have that voice
Yeah.
in within that setting, you know.
And it
So
made me a very
yeah,
good listener, which works for me now. It's kind of
yeah.
all paid off in that
That's
way.
that's one of the most powerful tools to have as a servant, if you will, is to have the ability to listen to
Yeah.
the needs of the person as they try to express it. Some people don't know how to, but if you
Right.
listen intently, um, not just with your physical ear, if you listen intently with
Exactly.
your inner ear, you can kind of figure out what was happening, even though they don't know how to express it. And so it's really a fascinating thing to watch as one goes through life. So here
Yeah.
you are not, you are the youngest of five. You have been restricted in your way to communicate to others, and you began to become that observer, the one that is in the background, if you will, watching the scenery happening. As you are engaging with this piece, being a young person, how did you begin to um, the information as it's being said around you, and you're listening to all of this stuff going on, not able to talk? How did you receive all of that information, and what did it do to you as an individual?
It made me very curious and um, want to know more. So as I
Mm.
would listen, I would, take a piece of information and want to research more of it to
Yeah,
to decide if it felt right for me or not. So, and as you said, it's more than just the outer ear that I was hearing. I also paying attention just to feelings, a lot of feelings, and
yeah.
how I felt and how the group or the family felt. So, and just kind of integrating all of it to come up with what felt right for me.
And how old were you, Karen, when those insights began to you began to notice those things? How old were you when you began to drink up all of that information and being an observer into the other's life?
I think on a, I guess, intellectual level, I started doing the research and the information probably in my teens. I was
Wow.
definitely collecting information, but I didn't
Hmm.
start looking at it from a different, perhaps more spiritual or emotional angle until probably my 30s, probably after I started having
Yeah.
children and thought that there's there's truth in what I've heard, but but it's not complete. And I need to do some more research on this because I don't think, actually, it was probably my 20s when I actually
Yeah.
started um, collecting more information. But I always, since being a very young kid, as you said, sitting back, observing, and I'm still a very good observer and
Yeah.
taking in of information.
Yeah. To be a good listener, you have to be a good observer. you know,
True. Yeah.
you've learned how
Yeah.
to quiet the noise and listen to the details of not just the words that, as I mentioned, people are saying, but you're paying details to even the body language, the emotion, the soul of the individual as they're speaking and saying and engaging. And when you're at that stage and looking into life and looking into people, life becomes a little interesting to you as you're collecting these data by watching everyone and you're moving through your life as a young woman. How did you manage in high school? You have all these siblings, which is five, and you're the youngest, and then you're going into a high school where you have access to additional people, additional belief system. You are from a strong religious background, being in the sense that Catholic, but as you said, not really practicing, if you will, but in that belief system. What was all of this stuff doing to you, Karen, as an individual, as this young girl? How did it begin to formulate your belief system on your own as you're walking through life?
Um, yeah, when I started high school, it was definitely eye-opening because in my Catholic grade school, we had maybe 20 people in my class, and I went to a public high school, and suddenly there were hundreds of people. And At that time, I was just so excited about all the people. I was able to talk to people easily and
Hmm.
not make deep friends, not be good friends with a lot of people, but I was finding myself able to come out a little bit, I guess, come out of my shell and
Yeah.
allow the actual interactions between, me and this whole variety of people.
Hmm.
You're right, different religions, different backgrounds from everyone. And I was really just absorbing it at the time. I wasn't really um, looking back, I noticed that I was raised without judgment apparently because I had no judgments against any of these people. Very
Hmm.
diverse group, and they were just people. So,
Yeah.
I during that time, I think it was just a period of getting to know the outside world a little bit
Yeah.
from what
Yeah.
I had been raised.
Yeah. And as you're moving through life and you're gathering information, because we all do, but I love talking to observers because we look at information differently, um, as we're sitting back, and we began to how we process it is differently when we are engaging with others and people. So as you're moving through and you're being exposed to all of the belief systems and all of the different peoples and no judgment, and as you're walking through your life, as you're now ushering in, going into young adult, young woman, and you're coming from your space of um, your family's house, even if you're going to a higher education, you live there maybe in some cases, but you're going to quote unquote higher education and you're exposed to even more um, deeper ingrained thought patterns and belief systems, that people actually began to investigate those belief systems and have a deeper conversation. As you were migrating there, how did you, when you get there, how did you arrive as an observer, one that has been studying behavior for a while? How did you manage and handle yourself there?
Actually, I probably didn't change a lot at that point. I think it
Hmm.
was a little bit later. So when I started college, and it was very similar to high school. I didn't move away from home. I still lived at home through that time
Yeah.
period. So it wasn't until I moved out on my own a couple of years later, got a real job and moved out on my own, that and I'm trying to remember the timeline of some of these things. I think I didn't start really changing the way I observed and felt about the people until I was in my mid-20s, I think. I
Yeah.
Previous to that, I still I I I mean, it was almost life was a party a little bit, I was just
Yeah.
really enjoying the new experiences that I hadn't had before.
Yeah.
So it was in my
So what was it?
mid-20s.
What happened in your mid twenties? Because you've mentioned this point right here a couple of times in our conversation about the mid twenties. What was the incident, Karen, that happened in your mid twenties to make you begin to look at all of the information differently? What was it, if you remember?
I think there were a couple things. I Both my sister and I had children at the same time,
Hmm.
in my mid-20s, and she took me to an angel workshop,
Hmm.
when our kids were young. We spent a lot of time together when our children were young, and she was on this journey that I wasn't on. Uh, that I'm not sure what fed her journey, but she had all this information, all these books, all these connections that I
Yeah.
had no idea about. So that was when I started realizing there's something besides just life on this earth.
Hmm.
Um, there's, it's not just we're born, we live and we die. There's something else.
Yeah.
And I think it was a combination of the kids and then being exposed, through her and through some other people I met. I was also looking for a church to raise my kids in because while
Hmm.
I didn't necessarily like church per se, I liked the community and I wanted to raise my kids
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. As you're beginning to get the additional information and you're beginning to become touched, if you will, that information as it begins to reside and begin to get deeper within yourself, it sends you on this search. Talk to me about your search as you begin to spend some time with your sister and she's bringing this additional information. You know that there is more, and your search begins. Talk to us about that little space right there as the additional information starts to, you start to acquire it. What was beginning to happen to you as an individual?
Yeah, well, I'm conflicted for one thing
Yeah.
because, um, the Catholic religion isn't open to some of the things I was being shown. At least at that
Hmm.
time, they weren't. And so I'm feeling like there's something that's going to take care of me. There's something that's going to be okay. But these things that I'm looking at were not, I, you know, um, when my parents might hear about something my sister and I we're doing,
Yeah.
we got lectured, even as adults. And
Adults, yeah.
so I was
Yeah,
definitely
it's not taught in
conflicted.
their church. The stuff you guys are heading to and angels and stuff like that is not a topic of discussion in your setting from your parents, their belief system. You're actually walking into heresy and all the other stuff that they'll
Yes,
start labeling you and all the different things. So, as you
yes,
guys are heading there,
yes.
I'm sure I've had some of those conversations with my parents where the belief system of the child began to shift away from the parent, and that those conversations are always such a rambunctious time,
Mm-hmm.
as they say. So here you are having this wonderful, but it's good that you have your sister that is there with you as an additional support as you are beginning to become aware of these things.
Yeah.
A- As a young child, because you had mentioned animal, um, what was your relationship with animals as a young child? How did you interact with them?
Uh, well, I loved them. I didn't think at the time I had any different relationship than anyone else with them.
Hmm.
I just considered myself an animal lover and was, very upset if there was an injured or sick or dead animal. But I never felt like I was one of those people that would bring a bird home to heal its wing or something like that. I just
Yeah.
and my we did w- cats, dogs were not allowed in our house, so we had outside animals. And we'd bring
Hmm.
them in when the parents were gone, but, nothing ever slept with us. There was no, I guess, deep bonding as far as sleeping
Yeah.
with or petting while watching TV, that kind of thing with the animals. But I honestly, looking back, I didn't think I had any special connection with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I was going through paperwork and my dad had given me some birthday cards and such, and they always had animals on them. And
Wow.
he would always make a comment about you love the kitties or you love the animals. And I didn't realize that it was apparent to other people that it was,
Oh,
or
wow.
that it was more than others, I
Yeah.
guess, different than
Wow.
others.
So you are, because you had mentioned it, and I wanted to see if there was some type of connection at a younger age as you're moving through life. So here you are with your sister. You guys are exploring. You personally are gaining some additional knowledge, and you're having these beautiful, rambunctious conversation with your parents when they find out some things about you. As you are moving through that life and gaining and bringing additional information into your life, and as it begins to shift you, um, looking back at your foundation, because your foundation is from the Catholic Church, now because you're going to have to move away from that, how did you begin to feel with this additional information and your foundation began to be questionable, and you have this other stuff happening and you want to know what the heck is going on in my life? So how did you handle that space, Karen? Because everyone that is on a journey has to come to that space, and I wanted to stop to make the listeners are aware that, hey, you're not alone.
Hmm.
Everyone has to get there. So Karen is here to help give you and I some insight as to that space at in her life. So talk to us a little about that.
So about how, yeah, how I started to be try moving into this
Yeah,
new space.
yeah.
Um, the, it, but it was two things. There was a little bit of not quite freedom, but a little bit of I guess expansion. Just kind of feeling like,
Hmm.
okay, so maybe what I've been feeling isn't wrong, but there's
Hmm.
still a lot of the thought patterns and the brain work that this isn't right. You better be careful. And
Yeah.
um, you're not supposed to do this. My mom even said to me at one point, you know, God doesn't want this. We didn't raise you to be like this. And um, so and I remember thinking, who cares what God wants? um, but at that particular time. So I definitely had some turmoil inside me still, but I also was beginning to trust that what I felt
Yeah.
was what I needed for me. And I
Hmm.
mean, it took a while to get there, though. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't immediate. I did go
Yeah.
through some troubling times in my head about how I felt about things.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing. That's why I've been there, and that's why I'm asking the questions, because I remember um, making that shift and the uncertainties that went with it, because of my upbringing, being grown up in church every day and all the stuff. And I know some of those um, shameful thoughts and
Hmm.
all the different things that you have to deal with when you're transitioning from what you're accustomed to create this new belief system that you find more in line with you
Yeah,
versus what they are in line with them.
yeah, yeah.
So that's
And
why I was asking.
every now and then, one of those shameful thoughts might pop up,
Oh yeah,
but now at least I can recognize it. It's not mine.
yeah. I learned how to decipher whether it was my parents or mine or where it came from, because I was 30s, I would say I was in my 30s, Karen. I was still living to please my parents, and I had my five boys and single dad, and find myself still living to please my parents. The
Hmm.
decisions that I find myself making was always with them in the back of my mind, to try and to please them. And I remember when I became quote unquote a man was when I had my final breakaway from my parents, where we had a discussion, and it was an issue that dealing with my kids that brought us to that place where My kids were very important to me, and how I brought my kids up, I wanted it to be how I wanted to bring, not how they wanted.
Right.
And they said something, and we had this fraction there that caused a little damage. But that was my day, if you will, that I became a man. I became
Mm,
Ken versus something else that my a son of Kenrick and Yvonne. I
right.
became Ken, separated from them at that
Yeah.
day. It was a difficult day,
Yeah. Wow.
so I understand. So here you are, you're gaining all of this information. You are now shifting and you're moving forward. You have your family there, your children also have needs and so forth. How were you managing yourself there? Because again, you have your children, you have your mate, you have all of these things going around with you. How did you begin to parcel yourself, learning how to separate and yet still maintain all the other needs that are around you? How was that?
It wasn't easy. And it was slow. I think perhaps I was a very slow learner. It was a slow process for me. Even as I started learning this other stuff, I still went back to some of the old churches. So I was with my
Hmm.
kids. So um, I went through divorce. I think that I was still just trying to survive on some level. Um,
Yeah.
so once I left my parents and once I got married, I I still don't know that I felt like an adult or like you were talking about when you became a man. I think that happened not until my 40s. Not a
Oh
man, but
wow.
a woman,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
own
yeah. I
person.
get it. Yes. Yeah.
um,
An
I think
individual.
I was very slow in
Yeah.
incorporating all of this. It was always a mix of the both, and I think that actually it never occurred to me until just now. But I think that led to a lot of my not anxiety, but a lot of my confusion through much of my early adulthood, I guess, before I really started knowing that this was
Yeah.
it and knowing
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah. It's a personal growth cannot be swift. If it's swift, we would miss so much.
Yeah, that's true.
It cannot be. And so it takes, look, guys, we are going to be, it's going to take a lifetime to learn who we are because I believe we are a spiritual being, have a soul, and we have this body. And all three of us go through trauma to some
Hmm.
degree. And we call it the onion effect, where we are peeling back. And it's
Yeah.
going to take us the entire lifetime on this planet while we're here to even begin to deal with some of them. You're never going to totally 100%, quote unquote, as they say, overcome it. And everyone is trying to overcome. It's not about overcoming, it's learning how to manage
Right.
yourself, how to learn to now I give certain thoughts permission because I know that it can bring fruit in my life. I
Hmm.
choose now what I do with my thoughts and so forth. So now, as you're moving through, Karen, because I know you're going to have to come to this space where you recognize that, okay, um, I know there's more. How do I get to find out about the more? Talk to us as to, as you begin to assimilate all these information, how did you begin? You said it was in your 40s when you stuff like that. After you come through trauma, which is a divorce, and you have your children looking at you, you have your world rocked, your security is gone, all of those things that one is told that we need to have in place in order to have our life, the beautiful, sweet life. Here you have all of this rocking at you, and you are now there. How did you manage yourself there?
So I did. I I got crazy with learning. I took
Hmm.
classes that I had just to take. Actually, it was my first animal communication class, but I took screenwriting classes. I took soul contract classes. I just took all kinds of classes just to see, who am I? Where do I need
Yeah.
to move towards? Because actually by then, I had actually had my second divorce.
Hmm.
So, in that time between, it was a lot of just trying to survive and not being able to
Yeah.
pursue what I wanted to pursue. So finally, at some point, it's like, I'm dying inside. And
Yeah.
I know that there's something else. And I know that I am meant for more than doing this job that I've been doing for, 10, 15 years. So I just started taking classes. I started reading books and watching movies. And my brother was active in his, it's a New Thought church, progressive church. And I started asking him, it's like, what book should I read? And I would go see his Christmas service, for example. And and I remember one time I went with my parents to one of his services, and we're older, and my dad comes away with, he didn't talk about Jesus. And um which, it doesn't matter if they talk about Jesus or not. It was the meaning of the whole service, but it was very interesting. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. That's my dad's take on it. But I just started absorbing as much as I could, and started my own practice, as far as some meditation, some prayer time, some contemplation. Started really honoring myself and
Yeah.
what I might need.
Yeah. That's such an important lesson to learn and a space to get to. And I tell people that there are tools available to help you. And Karen, you mentioned meditation. Meditation was mine. I know a lot of people journaling is
Hmm.
theirs. I've tried journaling and I'm all over the place. I can't. I've tried it. Trust me. Um, and I can have like certain thoughts for a little while, but journaling was never my thing. But meditation, I was able to flourish there, and I understood the purpose of it. And once I did, again, as you began to study, gain information, knowledge, began to lift your vibration, as people say, your energy learning, where you're able to understand your understanding of the spiritual realm began to become more enlightened, um, meaning that you are the spiritual realm. And as you begin to understand you and see what's happening within you, you become so aware of your breath. You become aware of every energetic shift that happens as I began to meditate. I began to control my life right there in my morning with my meditation and my prayer
Hmm.
time. I still
Hmm.
do it now. I'm 62 and I still do it every day. And so it is what made me who I am today. And people
Right,
ask me, why are you so calm? Because
right.
I deal with all my stuff in the morning and my meditation. And so by the time I get to them, they can't get to me. I've handled all my stuff and everything way before then. And I've meditated. I've seen and set the energy for my day. And
Hmm.
so someone else's energy cannot disturb my day unless I allow it to.
Right.
So here you are gaining all of this insight, Karen, and you're seeing and you bring in, you incorporated your meditation and so forth. As you begin to become aware of you, how did you begin to manage your relationship with your children and those that are outside of you, your family and friends and so forth?
With my children, I think that they very open. So my daughter started reading some of the books that I had. My son thought maybe I was a little bit crazy, but didn't, fully accepting of me. And I
Yeah.
think it's still a little bit that way, but he also relies on me for information sometimes that he thinks might be a little bit crazy how I get the information.
I
But
know they all do.
yeah. But I was seeking people who understood life like I did. So I didn't have a big, um, I guess, social network.
Hmm.
And and actually also at the time, I didn't feel like I had deep friendships. And
Hmm.
so it was one of the things I started working on was developing friendships with people that actually, you know, thought like I did or understood life
Yeah.
like I did. And so it was very intentional. Um, and I still talk to some old friends, but I've made a lot of new friends and I've created a new social network that really I like to be with because we can talk about these things. But at
Yeah.
first it was hard, I had to I had to stop calling some people because they just weren't good for me. I didn't want to argue with them, so
Hmm.
instead of trying to debate something, it was easier for me to just avoid them for a while.
Yeah, it's the healing process. You have to learn everything is energy, man. And anger is a state that people
Mm,
put themselves in. And that state, when they begin to release those words, is an energetic approach. It comes into your energy, love, and all of these things. It's palatable things. And so I call them states. And I choose now in my life because I've learned, Karen, that I don't need everyone in my life.
mhm,
I can be selective.
right.
And that is my choice. And there's nothing with that. It's because it is healthier for me not to allow certain people, how to control certain friendships and so forth as to the type of conversation I want to have with them. I control all of that. And so um, life is sweeter, I'll tell you that much, because I choose who to engage with and how deep I want to go in
Yeah.
because it is for my safety. One of the things I tell people you must learn in your journey, um, we call them boundaries.
Mhm.
And to learn boundaries is a very hard thing. Oh my God, don't think it's easy. You have to learn boundaries with your kids,
Yeah.
boundaries with your mate, boundaries with yourself, boundaries with your family, boundary with work. You better know that because if you don't, you can be destroyed.
Oh,
Period.
yeah.
I don't know what else to say. It can destroy you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even boundaries with money, I've discovered I mean, boundaries with everything. You're right on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Boundaries, everything.
mhm.
Food, um, information, everything. One must learn the principles of creating boundaries within yourself. I allow myself to watch certain shows
Yeah.
because I've set up boundaries because I know what it does to me personally.
Right.
So I set boundaries in the type of food, how much, and all of these things. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just my way of looking into life and looking into my life. There's no limitation there. It is simply choice, you know?
Mhm.
And people look at it as a limitation. I'm looking at it, I'm going, are you crazy? I have no limitation. I have choices that I make,
Right.
and that's the beautiful thing. So here you've gained so much. You're growing as a woman, and you've gone through your divorces. You mentioned, Karen. Talk to me as to because no one goes through those pivotal and traumatizing things and don't come out hurt or damaged as far as like your emotions and your belief system within you. and the thoughts and the words that were spoken about you in the less than, and you
Yeah.
had to learn to love yourself. Talk
Mm-hmm.
to us about that process of relearning how to love yourself and really accepting you versus whatever, parents, friends, ex kids, all of that stuff. But talk
Yeah.
to us about you learning to love you and recognizing some of the greatness and the greatness that resides in you and all that is all in you.
Yeah. Well, it was a tough process, ongoing process, of course, but a lot of it was, I did have some practices, excuse me, that I was doing, as far as meditation and affirmations and maybe some mindset work here and there. But I would say there was a seminal event, after my second divorce. In I was living a crappy, crappy life. It looked good on the outside. I
Yeah,
still had a pretty good job, but yet I was broke. I was living in a place I didn't like at all. I was too embarrassed to have people over to my house. I was, trying to integrate all these practices, but I was not feeling good about myself. And I realized that because of where I was living and the situation I was in. But my son got sick. He was an adult by then and had to come home and live with me. And I think I hit rock bottom there. I thought, this is the worst it could be because I can't nurture, a sick child in a home like this. What kind of a failure as
yeah,
a mother am I? So I think everything kind of accumulated up to that point, and I just realized I had to make a decision, and I had to decide, uh, that I was good enough, and I had to decide that I could do it, and I could take, not control of my life, but take, responsibility and start to make a new life for myself, a better life for myself.
yeah,
So I think everything just kind of came to a head at this event when my son got sick. And by the way, he's fine. He's healthy
mm,
now. So
yeah,
so that's all good. But I I doubled down on my personal practices, my meditations, and all my spiritual practices. Forgiveness,
yeah,
forgiveness. Oh,
yep,
huge. Gratitude.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, it, I
It
had
is
to
one of
forgive a
the
lot of
hardest
people.
thing.
What's that?
Isn't it one of the hardest thing to do though? But what I found, Karen, that when I was dealing with that, because I remember when I was dealing with that, I realized that out of it, I had to allow myself to forgive myself.
Yeah.
And it was really an interesting, I remember that day when that insight came into my life and I began to look at myself and I said to myself, I began to say, I forgive you. I forget, and I began to talk to myself. You have to have conversations with yourself, or you'll lose your mind. I keep telling people, it's not people who are talking to themselves that will lose their mind. It's the ones who are not, And so, um, I spend some wonderful times talking to myself because if I don't encourage me, who's going to encourage me? Who's going to
Yeah.
speak kind to me? I
Right.
had to learn how to speak kind to me because I was the harshest critic on myself. I would call myself names and all of
Mm.
these things and declare that I was a failure and all of these things, Karen. I had to reprogram myself and speak kindness to myself. I had to speak love to myself and I had to forgive myself. And then when I started forgiving me and allowing it to happen, I was then able to turn to people and really forgive them because I was still holding grudges. But I had to learn how to forgive me. And it's a process, as Karen is saying. This thing doesn't take, it's not overnight, guys. It takes a long time because you're doing deep work. You're
Yeah.
doing deep work at a spiritual level, at a soul level, and as a physical level. So you're cleaning up. So as you begin to do these things, Karen, as you begin to forgive, because you said you got to forgive a lot of people because a lot of people have always hurt us,
Mhm.
and it's always those close ones. And as you started learning how to forgive you, um, what did it do to you when you started seeing those things? about who you are, and you're able to love you for you regardless of whatever those people are saying about you, how did you feel? How did you begin to put your arms around
Yeah,
yourself
I think
in
it,
that space?
it became more compassionate and understanding
Yeah,
and accepting of myself, but also of other people, and really realizing that people have stuff going on and they can't, they're not always acting out of their best selves, or they're acting from also a history of hurt. And
yeah,
so, yeah, but that forgiveness of self is, yeah, so important, as you were saying, and it's
yeah,
so integral in getting to the point where if if another person is really affecting my mood, you know, if I'm having a bad emotion about something they're doing, where in myself is that living? Because
yeah,
perhaps there's something I don't like in myself about that thing
yeah,
that they're doing, whatever it is, that's causing a
yeah.
reaction.
And guys, you're listening to Karen and I, our conversation. She mentioned something earlier that I want to circle back. Um, and my listeners, and we're growing every day, and we have new listeners as well. And I tell people that the reason why we are circular and in our mess constantly year after year is because we haven't made a decision yet. We haven't come to that point where we're going to say, this is it. And Karen came to that. She told us, she said, I was in this circular thing, and then I came to this. My son's sick, came in. I'm looking at my state where I'm at. And I said, that's it. And when you are at that place, I would tell people, I call it, Karen, our statement of faith. And the
Mm,
reason why I say that is that you and I believe it more than anything else. It's that statement is not for anyone but ourselves.
right.
And when we make that statement, we believe it to the point that it's going to now cause you and I to take the actions that are necessary in order to bring us from the space that we were there. So you cannot have the declaration or without the action. It has to be coupled in order to propel you from your position. And when you come out of there, you would be amazed at the pace by which you come out, because you are now single minded. You are no longer circular, and you have developed that bullseye, if you will. And the human being, the human creature, needs that thing to focus on in order to lift them up. And so you're circular because you haven't given it given yourself anything to focus on.
Mm,
Find your statement and believe it, and release yourself from your place where you are so that you can experience your freedom. So here you are, Karen, you're moving forward. You've made your statement. You begin to move and you begin to create this new woman. You're studying, you're incorporating all of these things. And you still have all of, and I love that you pointed back to you until you start learning to be empathetic and forgiving of yourself. You will have a deeper relationship with others by way, because you understand exactly what that means when you say I love you,
hmm
or when you say to them I am sorry. Why? Because
mm,
you had to say that to yourself,
hmm
and you had to be really true and real with yourselves. And because you are, when you say to someone, I am sorry, forgive me, you have, man, you are talking about the real stuff because you're familiar with it. Until you have gone there, I think, Karen, a lot of people, when people say to me, I love you, I always ask them, what's your baseline? Do you love you? I'm horrible. Because you have to have a baseline, Karen, to what does it mean to you when you say I love you? Because we know that there are people that say they love you and they abuse that person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That person doesn't love
Yeah.
themselves. So you cannot love yourself and abuse yourself. It's just no way. So they have no baseline. So it's very important that you find that baseline. So here you are. Talk to us, Karen, as you begin to incorporate, as you said, you double down,
Yeah.
as you begin to really double in and go into meditation, go into all of your principles that you've learned.
Hmm.
What began to happen to you as you begin to double down, as you said?
Yeah. Well, I told myself all these things that they've been teaching me, I'm going to give it 30 days. I'm going to see what happens. And by the end of 30 days, I don't remember seeing anything out in the physical world that had happened, but
Yeah,
yet I knew something was changing because I kept going. I didn't stop.
yeah,
And because I was feeling better and I was just feeling a little bit lighter. I mean, I had done forgiveness practice every single day, as
yeah,
well as gratitude practices and affirmations and all kinds of, and meditation and all kinds of things. So I was definitely feeling lighter, feeling more expansive about life, feeling more optimistic, I guess. And then within the next year, almost like magic, I increased my income significantly. Even though we had filed bankruptcy and had a foreclosure on our house, I was able to buy my own house as a single woman, which I didn't think I'd ever be able to do. I started traveling again. I went on, I think, 3 or 4 trips that year, and I went to Kenya on a safari with some friends, which actually then further has transformed my life, just changed kind of the direction of my life. So things just started getting good. And I would say since that point, my baseline is I'm happy. Of
yeah,
course, there's bad, there's good, there's sadness and grief, but feeling so much happier with life ever since then. And it's been,
yeah,
a number of years. I don't know how many now, at least 7 or 8. What
yeah.
year is
That's
this?
wow.
But yeah,
That's amazing, Karen.
yeah,
Uh, the states that come into our life, there will always be, um, you know, darkness that is there. But I look at darkness different. Those dark times, I now look at it as an opportunity to grow because I, I've I've been teaching people that the darkness is there to make you aware of the creator that is in you. And so
mm,
when darkness comes, then there is more creation that you need to that needs to be take place. And if you allow yourself to begin to be in a meditative state, to deconstruct that emotion that came in and the situation that is presented, you will find the answers faster. I love what you said, and you begin to practice it as a lifestyle. Gratitude, your meditation, your all of your mantras that you say,
yeah,
and you encourage. And I said this to people: as you become focused, the human spirit is designed that once it becomes focused, all the other stuff is going to happen so fast. We are the ones that are delaying it. Karen said within a year, things began to change. At 30
yeah,
days, she knew internally that things were changing, but externally, it still hadn't manifest because
right.
that's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work inside first. And then when it
Exactly.
works inside, it will bring the outside. And so, as you began to enjoy the outside and change the inside, talk to us as to your relationship with your children as you begin to gain all of these other information, and now they're watching mom embark on this new life. And what type of impact did you begin to see as your children and even your family, your brothers and your sisters?
Yeah, the family, brothers and sisters is still, I'm still the baby sister sometimes. And so I've accepted that, although I do stand my ground now. So it's different that I used to perhaps walk away or just kind of fade into the background intentionally. But
Yeah,
I definitely show up in my power in my family, and e- even if they haven't changed, and perhaps some of them have, but our relationship in my siblings is well, what can I say? I feel like family is here sometimes to help with our own personal growth, and that's what they're
yep,
doing. My
yeah,
children, one of the things was I realized I needed to be a different person for my daughter. I needed to show her what was possible and not so that she, it's funny the information that we don't realize we are receiving from our parents that are becoming
yeah,
our stories. And I didn't want that old Karen mother story to become my daughter's
yeah,
story. So I realized, one, I had to start shifting that, to help her with her story and who she becomes. And then my son, um, well, we were together for a lot of this, and
yeah.
it, I think we have a very close relationship.
Hmm.
Again, I think he realizes the power that that I feel right now, that I have, that I am living, um, but he still doesn't know how he feels about it all. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Now you have found your voice. You found
mhm.
your voice with your family, found your voice with yourself, your children, and you're moving through. You've gained all of this knowledge, you've gained the insights, and so forth. When, Karen, did it shift to now morphing into becoming a servant? How did that process happen? And how did you welcome it, or did you had some resistance to it? What was that like when you were walking through your journey? You gain all of this. You're beginning to live. You're speaking now. You have your confidence. You understand. You love. You've forgiven. Now that you stand and you're standing, how did you move from that to one now that is kneeling before someone and holding their hands and walking with them?
Yeah, it's interesting you say holding their hand, because that's how I feel sometimes, is that I'm holding the hands of helping people. But I started ministerial school, and to be honest, I started it because I just wanted to know more, not because at
Mhm.
that point I felt like I was a servant. It was just like,
Yeah,
I want to learn as much as possible. But going through that process and then teaching classes of these principles and all these philosophies and principles, I've realized I think that the turn to actually serve came at the end of my schooling, but realizing there's a lot of people that need help, and how can I
yeah,
help them? Because it doesn't need to be like this. So what can I do? How can I, what's mine to do in helping people see this, or knowing, just understanding there's another option. So
yeah.
I think that
It's
was all, honestly, in the last few years, probably may, maybe 3 to 5 years ago. Just what can I do? How can I serve? Yeah.
yeah. I tell people the purpose of the journey is because you and I could be trusted with the information that we will do, what we will do with that information. Because you have a heart to serve. You come out and you recognize, there's more to life. You begin to see the greatness of you, and then you begin to look around others, and you That empathy that you felt about you began to magnify when you look at others. And it comes to a place where I tell people that empathy and all of those things is like a bolero, the beginning of
Mm,
bolero that starts very slow and is constant, and then it slowly rises into this crescendo, and you begin to get a little restless when you're laying in sleep because a lot of time you're not paying attention to the small little drum beats that are happening, but
right,
you know you want to do something, but you just
right,
don't know.
right.
And then it's amazing how um, things begin to manifest to you. I believe we're calling it, Karen, because I believe that when we get into that state and that crescendo begins to lift up inside of us, we're meditating and we're visualizing this thing, even though we're not sure of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But we are visualizing it, we are seeing parts of it. And I believe because we are, and the visualization process is one of those powerful tools that we utilize, I
Yeah,
believe we are actually pulling all of that to us. And then it will start manifesting, and people will say, it just happened. No, I believe we called it.
yeah. I, I,
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's a powerful process. So one of the things I always felt was because I felt a little bit hopeless, you know, during that time, is I want to make sure people have hope because until they have to have hope in order to grow further, I think. So
Yeah.
whatever tools can help keep that hope alive until they're
Yeah.
ready to say it's time. Let's
Yeah.
do
That's
it.
one of the spaces that hopelessness is causing them to be circular.
Hmm.
And then when they see the hope, like you saw the hope, you said, I don't need to be like this. And you saw the hope when your son was there. You're looking at your son and you saw the hope within that hopelessness and you began to move. Talk to me, Karen, as we're closing this out. Invite us into one of those conversations as you're holding hands, as you say, you see yourself
Hmm.
holding the hand of the individual as you're walking with them within their journey for that time being, and you began to talk to them, and you remember one in particular that you had this conversation, and you, as you're talking, you see them begin to make that change, and the light, as they say, began to enter in, and they look at you and go, "Wow!" And they get it, and you see them standing up now from where they are. Invite us to one of those, um, and just let us hear about one of those stories.
Okay. I I have to tell you that first of all, it's the most exhilarating thing when you see that light bulb go off in someone else's head
Yeah,
and when you know they get it.
yeah.
And one of the ways that I've been doing this now, I had to stop during COVID, taking trips, but I like, I- so because of my animal history, I like to work with people with wildlife because
Hmm.
I believe that if we can sit and be part of a a just part of a community of zebras and antelope and the giraffes, and we can understand that there's a connection, or we can feel it. I mean, when you're
Hmm.
sitting with them in silence and using the energy, practicing with our breath and using the energy to feel one with these. Once we realize everything's connected and that it's going to be okay because no matter what's happening in around us right now, this present moment is really all that matters, and I'm enjoying this present moment. And so one of the people that on a safari with last time. Immediately pre-COVID was the last time we went, and
Hmm.
going in September. Very excited. But anyways, she said, or I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't remember the right words right now, but she's
Yeah,
like, "You mean this is all that matters?" And that she's like, "That work problem that I'm having at home, or not at home, but back in the States, that work problem
yeah,
is really nothing." She's like, "That's really nothing in the big scheme of things." And I could tell that she
yeah,
understood we are not our problems.
yeah,
I think, yeah, I think it's just there's something not magical, but definitely something about, and I keep using my hands in a flat line because I see in my head, um,
yeah,
just sitting out in the savannah with all the animals around us and just feeling the oneness, feeling the connection, and knowing that there is wisdom being exchanged between everyone at that time.
yeah,
So, and then from there, though, I help people, it, when they get back. So after they've done this, and then there's an reintegration into real life. It's like, what are the
yeah,
emotions? Let's look at the emotions, and what are they telling us about what we need to change in our life? Because something was awakened. We know something's not working. What would work? What would feel okay? And we need, excuse me, we need to listen. We need to have that vision to what would work in our life and listen to ourselves, listen to our body, listen to guidance, meditation, journaling, in order to move forward with that.
yeah,
So it's a it's a it's a lovely, lovely um, expression of our potential, I think, to walk through this process of paying attention to ourselves and listening to our soul, listening to spirit, and making decisions and taking inspired action based on that. So,
yeah. I know it's that beautiful space of surrendering to the present, and
mhm,
it's a sacred space. You talk about the breath. I tell people the breath when one is meditating, and your the breath is the bridge between the natural and the supernatural. And so, with that knowledge, when I take my breath and my deep breaths and all of those things, I am picturing myself walking in and stepping into the supernatural realm with each breath, going further into the vision and into the energy of things and being able to deal with it. And so that breath is very important, that you must learn to um, be present
mhm,
and experience, as you said, that flat line that you're talking about. That place exists only after you've taken that breath.
mhm,
And when you get there, all is well. Peace exists there. The answers exist there. Um, the reality of your problem, as you say, back home, is you see it in its true light. It's not a
right,
big deal,
right,
and so
right,
we kind of create those things. But when you are in your space, whatever that is, journaling or however you get there, um, you bring them down to size, and size meaning
yes,
that you are greater than all of them that comes to you, because you are putting pressure of time into it. And what meditation and all the other tools do is take away the pressure of time. For our belief is the master of time. we slow it down. And when you get there, things change, guys. So I will welcome you guys to hurry up and get there. And one of the people that can help you is Karen. And all of you that have been listening to us, I'm going to provide everything for you to get to her so that you can have access to this beautiful spirit that is here, that is wanting and longing to hold your hands and walk with you so that you can see the greatness of you, even when you're on a trip and you come back to quote unquote reality. How do you manage yourself within that reality? She has insight, she has the tools, she has the knowledge. And I want you guys to get in touch with her, and we're going to provide all of that so that you can grow and become um, experience the flat line as she's talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you today, Ken.
It's
Appreciate it.
been an honor. Thank you so much.
All
So
right.